Okay, so last week we did part one of schools for neurodivergent kids. We talked about different school models, including traditional public schools, charter schools, magnet schools, and private schools. If you missed that, please be sure to go check it out if it's something that you are interested in and you feel like it would be helpful. It's really useful background for this episode. Today, we're going to be diving into part two, really, where we focus on different instructional styles and then finish up by talking about some alternatives to traditional schooling, if that might be best for your child and your family. Welcome to Parenting Neurodivergent Humans. I'm Dr. Morgan Beidelman. I am a clinical psychologist, former school psych, former teacher, neurodivergent myself, and parent to two humans, one of whom is neurodivergent.
And I'm Brianne Colpitts. I'm a school psychologist turned social coach for twice exceptional kids. I'm a mom to a couple neurodivergent kids and a late realized ADHD human, which means I'm double blessed with autism and ADHD. Thanks for being here. We're so glad you're here. So we've talked about public schools, private schools as two big buckets. And then within public schools, we talked about three common types of schooling, like how schools are organized. So neighborhood schools, charter schools, and magnet schools. So we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about teaching philosophies or teaching approaches. And you may find one of these approaches being used by a charter school, a magnet school, or a private school. These can exist in any kind of setup, but remember that other rules we talked about still apply. For example, a private Montessori school is not going to be required to take a kid in an IEP or provide them free speech therapy if they qualify for it. However, a Montessori charter school would be required to do both of those things. It's important to note that these terms are not regulated, so any school can say they're project-based or that they're Montessori. I used to work at a school back when I was working in
Montessori
schools.
inspired.
Yes, that was said they were a Montessori school and they were not. So I was like, what in the draconian? What's happening over here? It was like no talking. It was preschool and it was anyway. So yeah, bringing that up because I think it's important to make sure that you understand that people can say they're doing something, but then it could look different. So if you're looking for a particular teaching approach, it's important to ask questions about how it looks and how it's implemented.
And go and see it.
Yes. School visits are really important if that's allowed where you live.
Yeah, because some of those philosophies, so like Montessori, Waldorf, like there are specific trainings for those teaching approaches, and you can go through and you could be trained, and then you could be at a school that wanted to be Montessori or Waldorf or whatever, but then still isn't. You could have people who are trained who then end up in an institution that isn't enacting the philosophy to the full extent. But then you could also have people that are trained and are at schools that are implementing it with fidelity. So the visit is really important.
Yeah, just because they have like a shelf of wooden toys doesn't mean they're doing Montessori as designed. So yeah.
Yeah, same with classical academies, right? Like if you're looking for a classical education, again, go and see, because there's an entire curricula about how to implement classical academies with fidelity, and then you're going to have variation in that implementation. So if you're liking Waldorf or Montessori or classical or what have you, you should definitely go spend some time poking around in those buildings to see how well aligned those are. I should also mention that you could be at one of those schools and have people who are not actually trained in those methodologies.
Lots of homework. Sorry, we're giving you so much homework.
I know, I'm like, are we helping or are we just adding
or
to the chaos?
are we stressing you out? We just want you to know about these things. So
as you're going through it, like feel free to, wherever you live, and if you can, like connect with other parents who have been going through this. It's its own big system, just like all the other big systems.
We've talked a lot about Montessori, but what is that?
Montessori is based on Maria Montessori, who actually like originally was a woman who was focused on teaching kids who were originally considered like unteachable, air quotes here. And so her methodology was a lot around individualized supports for kids, following the child based upon like what they gravitate towards naturally, slowly and systematically kind of like increasing what they're doing so that they're moving from something tangible to something abstract, and that kids have a natural curiosity, natural drive, a natural drive for independence, and that we should kind of like walk alongside kids in that journey and foster independence and creativity as often and as thoroughly and authentically as we can.
If you're like, I've heard about this,
Mhm.
I'm being marketed these toys on my targeted ads on social media or whatever, feel free to do some of your own research or connect with people who are trained in these areas. I am not trained in Montessori. Just a little caveat there that we're trying to give you overviews here. So, yeah, more on other models.
Another model that we see a lot of, I tend to see these, at least here, I tend to see them more in charter spaces, but they might exist other places as well. But this idea of kind of like individualized instruction focused schools, they might go by a different name, but the idea is that kids can be a little bit more self-paced and move as they need to through content. So meaning reading content, math content, writing content, etc. They tend to have a pretty big tech component, and it can be done in a couple of ways. It can be done as an entire school model, but it can also be done as a form of credit recovery to try and get kids caught up who have been out of school for whatever reason. This could be because of medical needs, it could be because of mental health needs, it could be because of intersecting with other systems and needing and being pulled out and then being behind. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use them, but I think a way to think about this model is if you're looking for it for an entire experience, like that's what you want your kids' school experience to be, or if you've had some situation where you've been pulled out and you're trying to think about like how do I help my kid get caught up, thinking about these kind of individualized instruction focused schools or programs can be a way to do that.
Is this the same as like a standard based type of setup where kids can like be with their same age peers but be working ahead, or the kids who are, behind, I'm using air quotes here, around like, learning targets for their grade, they can all be in the same classroom but you're teaching based on what kids needs, that same idea?
Same idea, yes, and usually they have devices, and so
Yeah,
the
like
kids.
Chromebooks and
Yeah.
things. Yep,
Yep, like
yep.
a Chromebook or an iPad, and that's where they're getting their instruction primarily, and then the teacher is kind of just going around and supporting, maybe pulling a small group of kids, but everything's pretty much self-paced. And let's say that you already know a whole lot about fractions, you could kind of like test out, air quotes here, of fractions rather than having to sit through and do all of the kind of busy work of that unit. If you're like,
Yeah,
I love fractions and I did a deep dive on fractions.
yeah,
You could do that, test out of fractions and move on to the next thing.
yeah, cool.
See that as like a school model, but then you can also have a situation where maybe you had cancer and you were in treatment and you missed half of third grade and you don't want your child to repeat third grade necessarily, and you're trying to give them a space to do some work. You could do one of these types of programs kind of on your own pace. Maybe when you're feeling good, you could do a little bit of work, that kind of thing. And then when you are in remission or when your treatment is completed, you can re-enter and not be as behind. That's one example. Also, if you were involved in the criminal system and were out and your child was out of school because they were in like a juvenile detention facility or something like that, right? Technically, there's access to schooling in juvie, but
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, okay,
yeah.
good
And
examples, okay.
and so then you come back and you get out and you're trying to get back on track and you don't want to repeat 10th grade
Yeah.
completely.
Okay, cool. Those examples are helpful to my brain, thank you. Okay, so inquiry-based or project-based is another philosophy. These programs are often based around themes and have integrated classes, meaning that you're working across multiple subjects and they all connect to one theme. These programs can be a good fit for kids that are curious and love to deep dive into things and see how things are connected. Some of these programs also have like alternative grading models, which can be a good fit for students who benefit from showing what they know through projects or, say, like oral presentations instead of testing. Sometimes inquiry based schools can have a STEM focus. So, science, technology, engineering, math. There's also a STEAM model, which adds art into the acronym. Inquiry-based STEAM programs or STEM programs can have a great fit for curious kids who gravitate towards hands-on and like science and building things. So if you're like one of those people who you have like the monthly kits coming to your house for your kids to build things, school models exist that might be a good fit for your kid. Also, there are academically advanced programs. So often for younger kids, this could just be like gifted programs if your state hasn't cut those. As kids get older, they may be funneled into like an AP class. So those are like advanced classes or international baccalaureate IB programs. For kids who enjoy an academic challenge or relate well to others that do these types of programs, that can be a good academic and social fit for your kid. Also, little caveat there, sometimes these programs can be high pressure and it could be a mismatch if your kid gets anxious from that type of setup.
Yeah, another one that we haven't mentioned yet are CTEs, career and
Oh,
technical education programs. And in a lot of public high schools, or at least somewhere in a district, there will tend to be some of those options for kids. Where I live, you can take classes to become an EMT, or one of the, actually, it was just posted the other day. It was really cool. The kids were learning how to fly a helicopter, and they had partnered with the rescue team for the fire station, and were learning how to fly the helicopter. And so it's because they were part of this career and technical education program, so that when they graduate, they have some of those courses and then are set up to go into a trade. Not every place has these, so definitely, if you're like, my kid is probably not a college bound kid, that's not going to be their path, and you're looking for a trade, you can look for some of those programs, as well as you could also look at ROTC and some of those type of programs as well.
yeah. And even, I grew up in a rural area that had like agricultural components for kids. So you could do like an ag track. So I think this all varies based on where you live and yeah, just like what industry is there sometimes that drives like the specialization. So, yeah, not to take us further off track here, but you're right. Career and technical education is also another pathway or thing to consider.
Mhm, mhm. So everything that we've talked about so far has been within these realms of traditional public or private schools. And I just want to make sure that we also hit on some other options, because in case it didn't seem like it, this is complicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
and uh
None
and
of these models could be a fit for your
right,
kid. Yeah.
exactly. None of these models could be a fit, or maybe their implementation is not matching what you want for your child's experience. And so we have some kind of alternatives that are growing in popularity that I think are important to mention. Homeschooling is an option. Homeschooling with pods is another kind of offshoot of that, where you have a bunch of families or a couple of families that get together, and they kind of have this little pod of kids, and they also maybe take turns teaching things. Some even have a teacher that they like pool money together and hire a teacher for certain aspects of the learning. I think that can be a really good model too. One caveat I would say is, if you have a child who has a learning disability, I would probably do a little bit of extra research to make sure that the instructional method that either you or somebody else is instructing in is going to meet the need of that learning disability, because those can be a little bit specific. And sometimes the ones that are offered generally do not do that in a way that meets the needs of the learning disability. So I would just, if you have a kid who isn't learning to read or the math isn't mathing, it's not sticking, maybe look at some of those and look at the curricular options that might better meet those needs. I've taken a lot of phone calls from homeschool families where they're like, I think my child might have a learning disability. Like, what programming would be more appropriate? And so that's why
Yeah.
other ones would be unschooling is another big one where you basically are kind of like opting out of traditional teaching, and you are teaching your child, but you're not doing it in kind of the way that we typically think of school. I also see people do a lot of travel with
Right.
schooling, and kind of you're getting your academics, but you're also getting schooled in the world.
Yeah.
So uh,
Right. So unschooling looks nothing, or it can look nothing like what we think school looks like. And there's lots of books about this. Yeah, lots of thought leaders around unschooling. So if that feels like like if you're curious about that, maybe a little research around that too.
yeah. And then I also want to make sure to just have a note here about significant mental health concerns. I think it would be, as a psychologist, I think it would be remiss of me not to talk about this. So sometimes we get into situations where we have a child who has a significant mental health need that is making it very difficult for them to access or continually access a public school or a private school, right?
Right.
Any of the type of schooling that we've talked about so far. And they may need either significant mental health support to try and manage those symptoms, or they need to be completely kind of schooled differently. And so what you will sometimes see are day programs or inpatient programs that blend mental health and education. I will say in most of those schools, the priority is the mental health management, and the secondary component is typically the academics. And so you might be looking to access one of those for your child, and there's a couple of ways that you do that. Sometimes you do it through insurance, and sometimes you do it through your school, your public school, where your public school and you are realizing that your child needs some. Sorry, the cat was crawling up the
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah. Good times.
They
Yeah.
may You can
So
access it through the medical model or sometimes through your public school. Just want you to know that there are additional programs that are specific to targeting mental health.
sorry, I'm over here fighting with my cat. I mean, not really, but she's like trying to get all the things. Yeah, I used to work in a treatment program that was my school district's at the continuum of services, which we talked about before. It was like the top tier of support. And then if kids needed more, they would maybe move to residential treatment. Sometimes those kids were transitioning out of the criminal justice system, and this was the least restrictive environment for them. So yeah, I think that's important to mention as well.
Yes, and I used to work in the residential.
Oh, well, look at us. All
Uh,
right. I feel like we could go on and on about this, but should we wrap this up? What do you think?
I think probably. I hope that we have provided kind of a wide breadth of information for people who are wondering what school options can look like. We don't expect this to be the like end of your journey. It's going to be the start of your journey more than likely, or a midpoint in your journey, and you're going to need to really think about what would work best for my kid first, and then second, where can I find that? Can I find that in a public school? Can I find that in a private school? Can I find that in a homeschool? Like, first think about your child and then think about model if you have the resources to consider that.
Right. There's a lot of privilege packed into this episode that I feel like we didn't quite address, but what you just said, I think is important. And, sometimes your homeschool is going to be it. It's like what's available to you, it's what works for your family, and that's okay. So, I think just addressing that many of these decisions are packed with privilege, and doing the best for your kid means working within your family's constraints, dynamics, like your family system, whatever that means for you. So, We're rooting for you. And yeah, we hope you find the right fit for what works for your fam.
Yes, I agree with you. There's a lot of privilege packed into even having the conversation around s- school options. And if the option for you is your neighborhood school or a charter school in your area, then that's that, and that is a-okay. And then I think where you shift as a parent is to making sure that you're really knowledgeable on your rights and your child's rights. And we have an episode on school services, school-based services, and if that's what you're looking at, your charter school or your neighborhood school, and you want to make sure that you're more aware of the school services, then go check out that episode as another kind of starting place for you.
Wow, we did it.
Kind of.
Did we? Did we do it?
Well, I might listen back to this and be like, scrap the whole thing, actually.
Oh gosh. Well,
This created chaos and not actually helped. On that note, thanks for listening. We will be back next week. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it.
and if we are a good fit for you, then join our communities. We'd love to have you. You can find us on Instagram. Dr. Morgan is at Dr. Morgan Beidelman, and Brienne, that's me, is at Brienne Colpitts. And the podcast is on YouTube, and you can find it at Parenting Neurodivergent Humans.
As always, if you have a question or topic you want us to cover, send us a note. You can message us on Instagram or use the Google form in the show notes.
As always, thanks to our editor and producer, Erica Carpenter. And thanks for joining us, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. See you next week. Erica cut me crying.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Just a quick disclosure, this podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute a psychological client relationship and should not be used in place of expert evaluation or therapy. We have another episode that's on special education, I think, don't we? Do we not?
You know what? I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you. We have a school services episode. Thank you. Thanks, Erica.